Hey, Sonic! Enjoy your future! It's gonna be great!
Sonic! You've gotta come back with me! Back to the future! Regardless of what your future self told you, your future will be anything but great. For starters, Sega will be exiting the console business, so don't bother buying Dreamcast stock. You will be forced to publish games on the consoles of your greatest enemy, Nintendo. That's right, and not only that, your 3D exploits will include crappy games like Sonic 06 and Sonic Boom. Yeah, they're so bad that even in 2022, fans can still feel the stink of those titles. On the plus side, Popeyes will launch with an awesome chicken sandwich in 2019, so there's something to look forward to. Although 2020 is a whole other ballgame, which I probably should have fixed before coming to you. Anyway, I'm here to take you to the future so we can undo all this and keep Sega as a market leader. If you like what you see here, then please leave a like and subscribe for more cool content. It's what Sonic would have you do. And now on with the show. Seeing that I reviewed the HD version, it only figures I should review the 3DS edition. The 3DS port was handled by DIMS, the same guys that developed the Sonic Advance and Sonic Rush series. At first, all seemed lost for Nintendo fans when Sega confirmed the game would be for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. However, in Nintendo Power Issue 268, Sega revealed they would release a version for the 3DS. And there was much rejoicing. The game would eventually be released in November of 2011 in both US and European territories. Japan would get a release 1 month later, just in time for Christmas, despite Robotnik Claus's objections.
I hate that hedgehog!
By the time this game was released, it got, okay reviews. Nintendo Life remarked that, while good, it never quite recaptures the original's vibrant spirit that made it stand out 20 years ago. Nintendo World Report gave it a 7.5, praising the controls and level design, but felt the game was too short. The game received a 7 out of 10 from IGN. They remarked it was fun, but the level design failed to match the quality of the games they were based on. As for Game Informer, they praised the special stages and music, but criticized the boss fights and inconsistent level design. In the end, they gave it a mediocre score of 5.75. The funny thing is, Sonic is usually better received on handhelds than consoles. Only it wasn't the case here. The 3DS version did far worse, but looking back, has this game been misjudged? Is it a worthy addition to your 3DS library? Well, let's not waste any more time. To start us off, let's look at the story. All in all, it's not terribly different from the HD version. Some bits of dialogue are changed around, but the overall plot is the same. I didn't find the story all that compelling in the HD game, but I'm afraid it's less so here as it's mostly told in boring text boxes. It's strange that they didn't keep any of the cutscenes found in the HD version as the 3DS is capable of handling FMV. What's especially odd is how only Sonic, Tails, Eggman, and the Time Eater show up in the main story. Sure, you fight characters like Shadow and Silver, but they aren't essential to the plot in any meaningful way. In fact, we don't even see the cast until the very end of the game, in a photo no less. For such a celebration of Sonic's history, you'd think we get to see Sonic interact with the main cast for a bit. Maybe offer some witty banter between them.
I can't believe this! I was supposed to beat you this time!
I'm sorry. I didn't get that memo. I beat you every time. No, seriously. We beat this guy every time. It's like it's our job or something. Destroy me? You and what mustache?
On second thought, I can't expect too much witty banter from these writers. I suppose they felt the main cast didn't add much to the story, which they didn't. If anything, they were mostly in cameo roles. Aside from the boring text, what makes it worse is the fact the game is often too happy to tell rather than show. Take a look at this cutscene for instance. There's a scene where Tails rushes in to help the two Sonics, yet you don't even get to see what's going on. Tails gets hurt, and the characters move on like nothing happened. There are no stakes in that scene, and the whole thing feels hollow and tensionless. These bare-bone cutscenes lack the oomph you'd expect from an anniversary title, and I wasn't thrilled by the lame dialogue. Sonic Rush came out a few years early on inferior hardware, yet it did a much better job of showcasing cutscenes. How sad is that? But wait, there's more! These cutscenes are so gosh darn riveting that Sega even gives you the option of playing them again. Aren't you excited? Because I know I'm not. If I can say anything positive about it, the writers do manage to keep Sonic, Eggman, and Tails in character. Of course, there are a bunch of continuity errors I take issue with, but I'll get to it when I get to it. The 3DS can't match the HD version in terms of resolution and processing power, but it's still a good looking game for the system. It does a good job of modernizing the look of classic zones in 3D, and the character models are great. The look for levels such as Green Hill and Casino Night are nothing less than vibrant, and the character animations are good too. You gotta love the funny little dances Sonic does, and he'll react differently depending which score you get, just like the HD game. Green Hill largely resembles the Genesis game, with the only difference being that the graphics are rendered in 3D. It's nice, but not as nice as the HD version since the graphics appear jagged by comparison. It's quite a few notches below the HD version, but it's not bad for an early 3DS game. The look for Mario Sonic isn't all that different as it doesn't have the 3D perspective to distinguish it. Still, we do get quasi 3D sections, and they do add a bit of spectacle to the levels. It's not like the 3D games where the angle changes dramatically. It's done in a way that you still know you have to press right. Other times the camera will either pull back or will end up in the background, allowing for more dramatic shots. While classic Sonic is more rooted in 16-bit design, Mario Sonic is more filmic in its approach. Casino Night is another zone where they really nail the look. All the familiar bumpers, slots, flippers, signs, blocks, elevators, and spikes appear. They even include the mile signs, which shows they really did their homework. For those who don't know, Tails' real name is Miles per Hour. Miles per hour. Get it? Aside from the colorful trappings, they went as far as to include a lively scene in the background, complete with Vegas-style spotlights. The color scheme matches the original stage perfectly, and all those little glows give it vigor. The modern version is much more vertical in its approach, resembling the level design in Sonic CD. One of the few new interesting graphical elements it offers is the roulette, and it's shaped like Eggman. His comically large nose makes for a good spinner. By the way, does he own the casino? That might explain where he gets the money to fund the Death Egg. Just getting that elusive bonus is pure win. When it comes to Mushroom Hill Zone, all the familiar badniks, mushrooms, pulleys, poles, and roots reappear. There aren't any giant rings to jump into, but there is a collection of rings that form to look like a giant ring, so that's cool. The color scheme isn't as vivid as the Genesis version, but I do like the bits of sunlight. The classic Sonic stage is based on the first act, whereas Mario Sonic is based on the second. That would explain why the stage changes to autumn. I would have liked to have seen the stage change to grayscale like the original version, but whatever. Emerald Coast, on the other hand, is a dead ringer for the original. Get it? You can see the beach, the hotel, the umbrellas, the palm trees, the sand, the dock, the glowing panels, and even the lighthouse. It's not 100% replica in 2D form, but it translates the spirit of the Dreamcast original to perfect degree. It's sure to drum up nostalgia for those who have fond memories of the adventure game. As good as that is, it does miss the mark in a few areas. The angle for Mario Sonic can get a bit discombobulated at times, causing me to miss alternate routes. Radical Highway is another stage that feels as though they ripped the game from its predecessor and reconfigured it to a 2D plane. All the familiar GUN robots appear, even the hidden gold ones. I thought that was cool that they even included them. I also love seeing the God Rings blimp. You know, like, got milk?
Mom. Come on, Mario. Come on, Mario, jump! I'll give up.
Want to grow? The calcium in milk helps bones grow.
Ah, that 90s nostalgia. The Knight's Head even appears on top of one of the buildings. I'm glad they kept the game's original jokes like the Chow Soda. All the familiar set pieces are here, and the city background is bursting with life. The streetlights and red edges make the foreground pop out, plus they even include the rail grinding scene from the original's intro. The wall running makes for a nice spectacle, but that has more in common with Speed Highway than Radical Highway. As cool as this stage is, It has this underlying grittiness that's more appropriate for Shadow than it is for Sonic. If they're going to bother putting this in the game, they might as well let you play as Shadow. But then again, there's no classic Shadow, so that's a no-show. This level brings up a continuity error that I will rag about later. Now we get to Water Palace. Out of all the stages to appear in this game, this is the one that got the biggest downgrade. The frame rate is atrocious compared to the DS original, which managed to stay smooth and consistent. The inconsistent frame rate is much more noticeable after playing the DS game, and it's a good reason why it fails to capture the spectacle of the original. Although the 3D is more developed, the art style appears much blander. The original had these highly stylized ripple effects underwater that made it look appealing, so of course the 3DS version does nothing to carry that over. It's a stage that seems to work better in 2D than in 3D. Sonic Rush does look a bit rough in spots nowadays, but the level art holds up better than you would expect. As for Sonic Generations, this is the level they seem to put the least amount of effort into, aesthetically. The one thing they did differently was have a robot burst through a wall. That may make for a cool scene, but the overall look appears dull. Faring better would be Tropical Resort, as it's one of the most striking levels in the game. The space theme combined with the theme park makes for an awesome display. It's also one of the busier stages as there are alien buildings, spaceships, Ferris wheels, and a giant planet in the background. Not to mention the giant head carvings and totem poles that swallow you up. The stage combines elements from both the Wii and DS game. The first act resembles the DS version, whereas the second one has more in common with the Wii edition. It's one of the more original Sonic stages, even if it owes a debt to Mario Galaxy. When it comes to the bosses, the big arms fight looks pretty close to the original, although there's some dramatic lighting to up the intensity. Eggman can now move in any angle, thanks to the 3D structure, and the big arms design is an excellent model. The BioLizard stage looks great, although the boss does look pretty polygony. The look is every bit as moody as the original, and BioLizard even has the same animations as his Dreamcast counterpart. However, this does bring up an issue I had with Radical Highway. These are all Shadow stages, so what the heck is Sonic doing in them? Sonic never ran in Radical Highway, and no, I'm not counting the game's opening cutscene. Nor did he battle the BioLizard in his regular form. Did the developers not pay attention to these things? It's nice to know they pulled a 1984 on us and decided to retcon history. I guess Shadow was right about Sonic after all.
Faker, I think you're the fake hedgehog around here.
Aside from battling Eggman and running around at the speed of sound, you can also take time to play the special stages. They look awfully similar to the ones from Sonic Heroes, and I wouldn't be surprised if they just ripped assets from that game to make the deadline. Despite having a weaker frame rate, the stage is still mesmerizing to look at. The colors explode off the screen, the surreal look of these tubes make them pure eye-catching. It would have been nice to play them in HD, as it's sometimes hard to tell the spears apart from the bombs. To make up for that, you can play in stereoscopic 3D. The special stages feature the best use of 3D throughout the whole game, as the effect is terrifically immersive. Speaking of 3D, I have to admit I initially wasn't too thrilled about it since the game mostly runs on a 2D plane. Not helping was the fact Sonic Generations wasn't exactly the best use of the 3D gimmick. Seeing that it's a 3DS game, it's mandatory they had to include 3D somewhere. However, as soon as I started playing it in 3D, I began to realize how sharp it looked. It does a lot to make Sonic's world pop and feel more real as a result. It's slick seeing classic stages like Green Hill and Casino Night Zone in stereoscopic 3D, and the same can be said for the final boss. The collectible models are also neat to see in 3D. The whole gangs here are such as Sonic, Tails, Eggman, Knuckles, and Black Sonic. If there is one problem, it's the fact that 3D novelty quickly wears off and your eyes begin to accept it as normal. This might explain why the Nintendo Switch doesn't support stereoscopic 3D. Sonic Generations may look nice on the 3DS, but it does have a few bugs. For starters, the boring text and character profiles fail to tell the story in any compelling way. There's some bits of animation, but as a whole it's not visually interesting, and the cutscenes lack the cinematic flair of the HD version. Making things worse is the uneven frame rate. If you were hoping for a smooth 60 frames per second, don't count on it. The frame rate constantly dips and it's not the sort of thing I want to see in a speedy platformer. The Genesis games had better frame rate than this, and those ran on vastly inferior hardware. I'm sure this is something they could have smoothed out with time, but just chose not to. So that's a bit of a letdown. Sonic games are renowned for having great music, and luckily, this title doesn't disappoint. Just like the HD version, the classic stages sound more traditional while the modern ones have their own take. In Casino Night Zone, it sounds very similar to the Genesis version with classic Sonic. whereas Mario Sonic employs a wonderful jazz remix. That saxophone, drums, flute, and Whirlitzer piano all contribute to an excellent update of a classic. The music was originally composed by Masao Nakamura, the same guy who made the music for the first two Sonic games. Naofumi Hataro remixed the first act while Jun Senoue made the excellent modern remix. Akinori Minami composed Mushroom Hill for Sonic and Knuckles, so naturally Naofumi Hataro remixed the first act. It's not terribly different from the Genesis one. I mean, yeah, it sounds cleaner, but Hataya doesn't handle the remakes with much imagination. Jun Senoue handles the second act with far more elegance, upping the tempo and making the song even trippier than its Genesis counterpart. It's appropriate it should sound trippy. After all, Sonic is in the land of mushrooms. Now if only someone would take me to strawberry fields. The guitar work is sick and the overall tone is even more manic, which works as Mario Sonic moves much faster than classic Sonic. Next we get to Emerald Coast, originally composed by Senoue. He would remix both acts. The first act is based on the first half of the original level, called Blue Azure World. It has the same high-spirited energy that made the original so fun to play, making it one of my favorite Sonic songs of all time. Even if the level design was boring, I'd still be having a good time with this song. Senoue could have made it sound like a Genesis game and I would have been fine with it, but I'm glad he stuck with what made it so great. The second act is based on the second part of the original level, titled Wendy and Ripley. It's not a huge deviation from the original. It's one rocking song that will make you want to run across a beach. Aside from being catchy, there's a certain mystical quality to it that makes it even more enchanting. After completing those Sonic stages, we get to play a Shadow stage. The original tune was composed by Jun Senoue, and it was titled, Vengeance is Mine. Act 1 was remixed by Cash Cash, and it captures the hurry tone of the original with the best drum work in the game. It's a song that encapsulates everything about Shadow. It's dark, edgy, fast, and somewhat disturbing, which makes it stranger that I'm playing it as Sonic as he's bright and cheery. The second act was remixed by Circuit Freak, and although it doesn't sound as boisterous, it does sound more threatening in a way. It has this noisy, underground edge to it, and you can just feel Shadow's aggression. I don't enjoy it as much as the first act, but the distortion adds to the disturbing effect. With that said, we're going back to back to the Water Palace. The song appeared in Sonic Rush and was composed by Hideki Naganuma. If the first act sounds familiar to you, then surprise, they didn't change a thing. Well, okay, they used the CD version and it sounds a bit tidier, but overall it's the same thing. Instead of providing a unique mix, they just decided to recycle the original theme. What was it I said about the Water Palace getting the least amount of love? All in all, it's not a bad song. It's funky and all around fun, but if you're craving something different, then the second act is for you. The second act was remixed by Cash Cash, and it seems to have more of that fiery spirit, if you know what I mean. It's definitely a spunkier tune, and I love the sirens here, putting the rush in Sonic Rush. In the next level, we get the tropical resort of Sonic Colors fame. The first act was taken from the said game, so nothing new here. It's as though they started getting lazy or the budget ran out. The songs were composed by Tomoyo Atani, and Act 1 reminds me of surf music, despite the fact it's taking place in an interstellar amusement park. It's as though the song is inviting you to hang out and have fun in this whacked out adventure. Act 2 is less subtle as the guitar riffs are more hard-hitting and the tone is faster, which makes it a good fit for Mario Sonic's spastic gameplay. Otani returned to create this remix, and it's great. In the first act, felt like you were celebrating a beach party, and the second act is more like you're running through it. When you're not running through the main levels, you can take time to battle Eggman, the Bio Lizard, or one of Sonic's rivals. The Big Arms battle was originally arranged by Akinori Minami, and it was quite an imposing tune. Cash Cash did an excellent job with the remix. They took it a few steps further with an electrifying guitar and drums that really slap. There's a greater sense of panic, as if the music is warning you not to let your guard down. The song is much longer than the original as it descends into madness. It's another terrific remix, and one that does Sonic 3 proud. Supporting Me is the name of the Bio Lizard boss theme, originally composed by Hayao Otani and Fumiko Mutani. The vocals were done by Everett Bradley. This would have to be the most sinister song in the game, as Zeri tone is more befitting Xiao than Sonic. The drum work is harsh and the guitar sounds are chaotic, as if everything is falling apart. Not helping are the creepy vocals. The song was remixed by Richard Jacks, and you can feel the hopelessness in the song. As much as I like it, it goes against the optimism of the Sonic franchise and this game. There is a reason why the dark stuff was mostly left to Xiao's story, as the hero side was much lighter. Remember the Egg Emperor? He was the next to final boss in Sonic Heroes. The music was composed by Jun Sonoy, and he would remix it here. It delivers the same edgy, climactic tone that made it so frantic, but not much new is done with it. I do miss Dean Bristow's immortal lines such as,
Take this! I'll show you what real evil is! Defeated? Impossible! No!
but Mike Pollock has added his own immortal words, such as,
Very clever of you! Why you?
The special stage music in Sonic Heroes was composed by Naofumi Ataya, so Cash Cash would provide their own spin on it here. It's similar to the GameCube game as it sounds hasty, yet acidic. The energy builds up, and you know you're in one heck of a ride. It's a perfect accompaniment to a surreal stage. As you play along in the game, you can unlock new pieces of music, much like its HD cousin. Angel Island is one of the more popular songs to get remixed, which is why I wish Sonic Mania remade this level. Instead, we got a tutorial stage, and it just isn't the same. Regardless, this mix is jamming as it captures the fun and whimsy of that stage. Door into Summer was one of the better songs from those Chaotix, and while the HD version went the more classical route, this one is more retro sounding. There's just something so dreamlike and fantastical about it that you can't help but be charmed by it. Marble Garden Zone was given a funky remix. It's as though the song smoked a J and got high. The weird distortion and upgraded instruments would fit perfectly in an HD version of Sonic 3. As cool as it is to unlock new tracks, what's not cool is the fact you can't play them over the levels like the HD game. This is a real problem when you're tackling the optional missions, as the music can get really repetitive. No, I don't need to hear Supersonic Racing for the 1000th time, thank you very much. With that out of the way, it's time to tackle the gameplay. The game was directed by Tetsu Kitano, and his earliest work on Sonic would include programming the special stages for Sonic 3D Blast. He was also the main programmer for
Sonic Jam.
Aside from programming the Sonic Adventure games, he also directed Sonic and the Black Knight. He would later function as a technical supervisor for other games. If you ask me, he seems to function better as a technical supporter than a director. It's not to say the game is bad, mind you, but it doesn't quite reach the heights of the HD version, as flawed as it was. In the HD version, Classic Sonic would focus on 2D gameplay, whereas Modern Sonic was given 3D sections. So, what did they do here? In Sonic Generations 3DS, the differences are a bit more subtle as they are both 2D. Gameplay-wise, Classic Sonic is more focused on the simple run and jump platforming the series is known for. There is definitely a heavier emphasis on platforming, whereas Modern Sonic is more concerned with breakneck speed. His gameplay style is more akin to Sonic Rush. The boost is highly recommended as there's less time to stop and smell the roses. Modern Sonic is more manic, much like his HD counterpart, and those who enjoy that adrenaline rush will enjoy playing as him. However, those who prefer a more methodical approach will be less enthralled. The Classic Sonic stages resemble the ones from the classic games, whereas Modern Sonic puts his own spin on them. It's like Sonic Mania in that regard. That sounds fine and all, but the differences between them get even more blurred once you can use the homing attack as Classic Sonic. And no, this is not an unlockable. This is an actual skill you're given early on in the game. This took me completely by surprise as it was nothing more than a custom skill in the HD game. You'd think they would want to do more to differentiate the two Sonics, but no. By giving Classic Sonic a homing attack, he comes across as a slower, less agile version of Modern Sonic. I didn't mind in the HD game because it was an optional skill. You didn't need to complete any missions. Also, the HD version at least gave Modern Sonic 3D levels to make him stand out. Here the homing attack becomes a necessity, and it flies in the face of what made the 2D game so challenging to begin with. I remember really liking the homing attack back in my youth and wanting to see it in the 2D games. But now I realize it only made sense in 3D because it's difficult to jump on enemies from a 3D plane. That would explain why Mario got a punch button in Mario 64. For Modern Sonic I can excuse it since it is back, for Classic Sonic, not so much. In the HD game, Classic Sonic felt kind of redundant since Modern Sonic had a lot of 2D sections. Seeing that both Sonics are 2D here, the idea of giving him a homing attack makes him feel all the more redundant. Modern Sonic also has a wider repertoire of moves. He can not only boost, but can use the pound ground and do the wall jump. All of which makes Classic Sonic appear duller by comparison. In fact, what's the point of even including him then? They could have gotten around that by giving Classic Sonic more moves like the elemental shields, the instant shield, the super peel out, and some classic items like the rocket boosters. But this is dimps we're talking about. They're not known for giving Sonic depth. I would have liked to have seen Classic Sonic focus more on stage gimmicks and precise platforming, whereas Modern Sonic focuses on the boost. Instead, they copied the template for the 2D games and gave Classic Sonic a feature he has no business using. As for the controls, they're functional, but they don't have the smooth control found in the Genesis games. And I hate the slow recovery time that happens whenever you get hit. The lock-on attacks were always a problem in the 3D games, but you wouldn't think it'd be such a problem here. In one particular mission, the stupid thing kept malfunctioning, even when I was close to the enemy. A lot of times the reticle appeared, yet I was the one to take damage. What the heck? How the heck do you screw up a homing attack in 2D? I can understand it being harder to program in 3D since there are so many angles and enemies you have to worry about, but in 2D? There is only one direction you can go, so this doesn't make sense. To make things even more infuriating, Modern Sonic is able to home in on monitors, yet Classic Sonic can't. Why the inconsistency? The sad part is that Dimps has managed to make 2D Sonic games with solid controls. They got it right with the Sonic Advance series, so why couldn't they here? The controls are at least still playable, and according to Sonic Team, that's good enough apparently. However, this should not be good enough. When designing a game of this speed, the controls need to be as tight and responsive as possible. Less than stellar controls aside, it was nice to see some classic levels return. The levels still managed to provide the thrill of speed, plus they were mindful to include alternate paths for replayability. There is something about Sonic's roller coaster design that manages to captivate, even if the level design isn't perfectly tight. The levels presented are plenty of fun, but I'd be hard pressed to say you have as much fun as you did when you first played them. To be fair, you can't expect an anniversary title to have the same impact as the original games, so let's see how this pans out. This wouldn't be a Sonic anniversary without Green Hill, so here you go. It's actually the first thing you see when booting up the game. If you were expecting a fresh new take on the zone, then you're going to be sorely disappointed. Classic Sonic stage is nearly identical to the one on Genesis, so it's not exactly an exciting way to start out. I mean, yeah, the level in Sonic Mania is similar, but they still put in the effort to make it stand out. There were elemental shields, differing paths, some new visual elements, and even a mini-boss to ensure you were playing a different game. Here it's a total rehash, and the only thing it has going for it is the 3D visuals. The modern Sonic take is more interesting, although not nearly as good as the HD version. The burst of speed is pretty cool, but I hate how they add those annoying crevices from the modern games. I didn't like them in the 3D games, but at least then you could see ahead of yourself and duck under them in time. It just slows the game down, and the vast majority of players aren't going to dodge on their first try. The boost is really what sets this level apart from Classic Stage, but the 2D perspective is not nearly as compelling as playing in 3D. It feels more like a combination of Sonic 4 and Sonic Rush put together. It's hardly a step forward, but at least it's entertaining. The level serves as a decent introduction to modern Sonic as the enemies are sparse, there aren't too many bottomless pits for you to worry about, and the level never overstays its welcome. It does have a few interesting set pieces like the falling totem pole, but it's nothing amazing. After that, we enter Casino Night Zone. Surprise, surprise! Classic Sonic's level plays exactly like the original stage. Overall, the level is okay, but the pinball physics don't feel as tight as the original. The springs don't propel you as fast, and there are times when you get stuck in the elevator, a problem I never had to deal with in the original. Because of the less than stellar physics, the level loses a lot of the momentum that made it so fun. In Sonic 4 Episode 1, they at least added some new gimmicks like the fact you could run on cars or line them up to gain an extra life. But here it's just another rehash, and an inferior one at that. At least the actual slots are still fun to use, as it's so satisfying hitting that jackpot. The only bad thing about it is that it doesn't pay to use them. The longer you stay in the level, the worse your score will be. For some reason, you get a lot more rings in this version as even the bumpers provide them, as well as the slots that were originally designed for points. Modern Sonic provides a more interesting iteration as there are a few gimmicks like the Eggman Roulette. Thanks to modern Sonic's advanced capabilities, he can now boost into the pinball badniks, so it's sweet revenge. The boost is even required to get through some of the bumpers, and I thought it was a clever way of incorporating it. Seeing there are more obstacles, it's a tad more difficult than the classic version. The one thing I've noticed is that the level is more vertically oriented as well, which is fitting as the whole casino level plays like one big pinball machine. It's a step up from Modern Sonic's first level as the layout gives you more to do than just spam the boost button. Next up is Mushroom Hill, as it contains plenty of the hop and bob that made the stage famous. The funny thing is, I can no longer play the stage without thinking of the Mushroom Planet from the Sonic movie. All of the familiar gimmicks are there, such as the bouncing mushrooms and pulleys. Speaking of pulleys, I never liked them since they slow the action to a crawl. It would have been better if they had gotten rid of them, or at least made them faster. Seeing that the special stages from Sonic and Knuckles are no longer present, the developers did fill in the gaps by changing the big rings into a collage of a giant ring. That was pretty witty on their part, but Mushroom Hill is exactly my favorite level from Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Hydro City and Flying Battery are more fascinating in my opinion, which would explain why they were remade in Sonic Mania. Well, at least they didn't include the tedious Sandopolis zone. Mushroom Hill is one of those levels where you can move as fast as possible, but you'll miss out on a lot of interesting routes if you do. This is why the mushrooms and the channel bars are so essential, as this level is made for exploration as well as speed. However, the exploration part is somewhat lost when you exclude the giant gold rings. I mean, it's fun finding new paths on your second playthrough, but it's not nearly as gratifying as the original game. Mainly because you can't play any of the special stages here. It's odd seeing a Sonic 3K stage being given the Sonic 2 treatment. If you prefer Sonic 2, that might not be much of a bad thing. Other than that, the level is too similar to its Genesis counterpart to have any surprises. The modern version is better as it features a new gimmick in the propellers, which are similar to the mushrooms you could float on. Seeing Mushroom Hill Zone get the Sonic Rush treatment is a cool idea, and this stage is more platform heavy than most of modern Sonic's levels. The only problem is that modern Sonic controls awkwardly whenever he's moving slowly. It's also not a long stage as it lasts about 2 minutes. If there is anything that I learned from this stage, it's to not waste your boost meter as you need it in the final stretch. All in all, it's a good level, but there's not a whole lot to it. This will explain why I find this game to be somewhat forgettable. In case it's not obvious, the developers had a clear preference for the Genesis era as its heralded as Sonic's golden age. The Genesis era had 3 levels devoted to it while the Dreamcast had 2. The modern era also gets 2, so that seems to be a pretty damning indictment on the more recent state of Sonic games, but I digress. At this point, the developers ran out of 2D stages to recycle, so they had no choice but to make a 2D stage from the ground up for classic Sonic. It's here where they actually put a little more thought into things instead of mindlessly recycling past content. Much to my surprise, the classic version plays a lot closer to the original version. Part of that has to do with the fact Sonic didn't have the boost at that point. Another part has to do with the fact it feels as though the level has been flipped to a 2D plane. A lot of the enemies and gimmicks are strategically aligned in such a way to mimic the 3D stage, but thankfully it's not a carbon copy. In any case, it's a good example of how to do an homage right. It feels familiar, keeping the things you loved about it, yet it provides its own spin on it. The one part I didn't like was the whale chase sequence. In the Dreamcast version, it was fast and exciting, but here it's slow and uninteresting. Overall, it's one of the better design levels as there are more alternate paths to uncover and more secrets to find. Modern Sonic feels less like the Dreamcast game and more like a Sonic Unleashed level. It's fun in its own right, but you move so fast on that level that it's easy to miss alternate routes and goodies. This was a problem in the earlier stages, but here it's more apparent. The whale chase scene is a joke and is nowhere near as exhilarating as its Dreamcast cousin. You'd think this is the one scene where they'd want to incorporate the boost, but instead you get this lame automated sequence where you need to press B a few times. This is the one time where I have to give Classic Sonic the win, as the level design doesn't feel all that different from the other modern stages. For modern Sonic, there are a lot of empty spaces where you just run around, plus there's no spectacle, no creativity. Once we finish relaxing on the beach, what better way to celebrate Sonic's past than by playing a Shadow stage? I have said that this game's take on classic stages pale in comparison to the original games, and this is no exception. Classic Sonic's version feels unbearably sluggish, and it doesn't help that the floating cylinders move at a snail's pace. Another thing you'll notice are the flagrant use of speed boosters. I know they exist in past levels, but here they feel overused. It turns out they have to use them as there are stretches where you run around slowly with nothing happening. They're boring, and I didn't care for the cheap enemy placements either. I do have to give this level credit though. The highlight has to be the moment where you bounce across the God Rings blimp, and it's one of the few clever scenes in this level. I also commend the developers for warning you of bottomless pits as you're forced to take leaps of faith. In short, it's a decent level, but nothing all that remarkable. Modern Sonic is a little better since he captures more of the speed that made the level infamous. I also appreciate the little bars you swing across, so you have more to do than just hit boost to win. There are a few other things like the wall jump to break up the monotony, but it's here where the homing attack is really abused. The boost gameplay does have its disadvantages as it makes it hard to take the alternate paths. There is some platforming to do here. I wouldn't mind if Modern Sonic controlled better. Sadly, he wasn't designed to move slowly, so this is more likely to result in death as the bottomless pits are more abundant from here on out. What I really didn't like was how the enemies kept ambushing me, often out of nowhere. And there are those obnoxious planes that shoot at you, often giving you no chance to dodge them. In the console version, this was tolerable since the 3D perspective allowed you to see more in front of you. It's not all bad though. I did enjoy the cooler touches like sliding across the bridge and the wall running, although that has more in common with Speed Highway. Overall, the level design is pretty shallow. Next, we get to Water Palace. It was nice that they included one of the levels from the handheld games, although I don't recall Water Palace being all that spectacular. As far as water levels go, Aqua Reef and Hydro City are more well known. The only thing this water level had going for it is the fact you boost through it, but that's lost on Classic Sonic. The result is a slower, more ponderous affair, so it plays more like a typical platformer. It's not to say there isn't any element of speed. There are plenty of speed boosters and springs to help you along your way, but it's one of the weaker Classic Sonic levels. There are a few neat touches like the bubbles you bounce on, and the giant robot that takes after the Kool-Aid Man. Yeah! What I find strange is that Classic Sonic can't run in the water, yet he was able to do that in the Genesis games. What the heck, Sega? I was also surprised to find that the invincibility monitors provide air, something they didn't do in the classic games. The stage works better for Modern Sonic as was clearly tailored for him. Being able to skate on water is always a treat, although it's a pain trying to time it as the platforms are narrow. It wouldn't be so bad if the controls were a little better. One thing that made Sonic Rush stand out was the fact you could perform all those little button combos to fill up the boost meter. This added an extra layer of energy to an already energetic product. Here you just fill it up by collecting rings and destroying bad guys, so it feels shallower by comparison. Regardless, the Mario version is a nice, if unimaginative tribute to the Sonic Rush stage. It's not nearly as mesmerizing, and the one thing that shocked me is how much better it plays on the DS original. Finally, we get to Tropical Resort. These two acts are the most difficult in the game, and they're the last ones you'll play. I wasn't too thrilled by them at first since they seem to last an unusually long time, but they get better once you familiarize yourself with them. As expected, Classic Sonic emphasizes the platforming aspects of Colors, while Mario emphasizes the speed. Sonic Colors has become something of a cult classic on the Wii, and it's no surprise they wanted to bring it back here, and on modern consoles. I'm glad they did that as the Wisp power-ups added something different to the proceedings, so you're not just running around like a madman. The Fire Wisp was never my favorite power-up, but it does get the job done. Mastering it can result in great rewards, and I especially like how you can use it on one of Eggman's rides to open up a new path. I would have liked to have seen other wisps, but I guess it would have been too much for 2 stages. If you want to know how the wisps work, that's what the question mark at the bottom screen is for. However, if you're like me, you'll most likely ignore it and fiddle around with the power-up, resulting in a lot of misfires. That alone may have accounted for why I didn't enjoy this level at first. It's been a long time since I played Colors, so I may have forgotten a few tricks. This level has a sharp learning curve, but once you master it, it becomes a very fun level. The Fire Wisp was brilliantly executed, and I do appreciate how they upped the challenge. Bombless pits are more common, and you actually have to think about how you want to use the homing attack, rather than just mash the jump button. It requires greater precision than before, and I can get behind that. It has the best use of the homing attack with the floating balloons and fireworks you have to bounce off of. I know I said I don't like seeing Classic Sonic with a homing attack, but I can appreciate when it's handled well, so this scene gets my grudging respect. Still, it would have been more appropriate for Modern Sonic. Since Modern Sonic's all about the speed, it's only natural he gets the Laser Wisp. Unfortunately, the level's not as polished as the first act as you're often going too fast to avoid obstacles and the occasional bombless pit. This was a problem in past levels, but here it's at its worst. You'd think that by taking the shortcut you could find an easier path, but there are times when it actually makes things worse as you can't see the pit at the bottom.
Whoa!
Other times enemies will throw hammers at you, causing you to fall into the abyss. The laser limbos are nearly impossible to avoid on your first try, and I don't like the stupid rail section at the end as it's gotten me killed a few times. If you think all of that is annoying, try clearing this stage without dying. Oh, and if you don't know how to use the Laser Wisp by now, prepare to ricochet into the pit. This level highlights everything wrong with Modern Sonic's design. Up to this point, the game has been encouraging you to boost, but here it ends up working against itself. There are a lot of moments when boosting is the last thing you want to do. Plus, this level can go on for quite a bit if you don't know what you're doing. The boost is heavily abused, and it doesn't allow for deep gameplay. When you're boosting, there's not much time to get a good view of your surroundings, so this would explain why I constantly run into traps in this level. It's a level that requires multiple playthroughs to really grasp it, but unlike Classic Sonic, it's not really worth it. I declare it the worst of Modern Sonic stages. As far as levels go, I think they did a good job with their picks. Thankfully, games like Sonic 06 don't appear here to ruin your fun and make you relive the trauma of seeing a princess make out with a hedgehog corpse. That still haunts my nightmares. Seeing this as a handheld game, I would have liked to have seen Sega tag more handheld titles like Sonic Triple Trouble, Sonic Chaos, Sonic Advance, and so on. I mean, the HD game already covered the mainstream games. Still, I did enjoy seeing Casino Night Zone and Emerald Coast again. They were always among my favorites. The third era does at least focus on DS games like Sonic Rush and Sonic Colors, so there's that. It's still baffling that they chose not to create any 3D stages as the 3DS was more than capable of handling it. I guess they were desperate to meet that deadline, so what can you do? In case you get tired of the main levels, there are plenty of missions you can undertake. Unlike its HD cousin, the 3DS game makes no pretensions of its length. The side missions are completely optional, and you don't need to complete any to advance. The game isn't very long to begin with, It will only take you 2 to 2.5 hours to complete, which is a tad shorter than the HD version. At least that game could last 4 to 6 hours. More levels and boss fights certainly would have been welcome. The main game may be short, but at least the missions extend some life. They're not vital, but they're fairly simple and tastefully done. They're not as good as the main stages since speed is the name of the game, but they do offer a decent diversion from the main action. They include your basic missions like collect a number of rings, clear the stages within a time limit, defeat a number of badniks, etc. Some of them can be quite enjoyable, as I like getting 100 rings in Casino Night Zone and collecting a number of spears in the special stage. Even the most basic of missions like defeating a number of enemies can be a pleasure. Most of them don't last for very long, so completing them all should take about a few weeks. Mostly because they require a lot of pay coins. Remember those? They were in-game currency for the 3DS you used to purchase items, characters, and game modes in certain titles. The way it worked is that you carry your 3DS with you, and you would earn a coin for every 100 steps you took. Or you could be a filthy cheater and shake the 3DS around while you watched your favorite show. You could only earn a maximum of 10 coins a day, and the most you could store was 300. I'm not sure why Nintendo thought this was essential, as it was a feature they quickly dropped and I never cared much for it. I guess it was their way of encouraging kids to get out there and exercise. As admirable as that is, I don't need a game to tell me that. There are a lot of missions in Sonic Generations, so be prepared to hit the treadmill, fatty. I will admit this did put my play coins to good use, as I only rarely use them. The only other times I can remember using them was for Meat Plaza and Puzzle Swap. Anyway, the good thing about these missions is the fact completing them will unlock new pieces of art, music, and 3D models for you to gawk at. This was the real reason I kept coming back, as the collection works as a nice tribute to Sonic's past. A time capsule, if you will. As cool as it is to kick back with some nostalgic tunes, not all of the missions are created equal. Some of them are complete nonsense, like the one where you have to get through Emerald Coast without hitting any enemies. I hate this mission as both Sonics, since the developers really go out of their way to put them right in your path, making it impossible to dodge them the first time. The only way you can get through this is by rote memorization, and I hate it when games do this. Another mission I hated was getting through Trouble Resort as Mars Sonic without dying. I say this because the stage is so poorly designed that there are a lot of cheap ways to die, so getting through is an exercise in frustration. Aside from that, there are these one-ring boss missions. They are exactly what they sound like. You fight the boss using one ring. Somehow, I thought they would be a lot harder, but they're not that difficult. Beating the Bio-Lizard Egg Emperor with just one ring is perfectly doable, and I'm glad I was able to get through them without much hassle. Still, the more you play these missions, the less invested you'll get. They are very monotonous, and you'll likely tire of them before you're even halfway through. They're not nearly as creative or as well made as the ones from the HD version, plus those had a lot more variety. There are only a few times in the 3DS game where they'll get creative, like having you use the Wisp powers to accomplish certain goals, but other times you'll be doing the same things. Get to the goal in time, clear a level without getting hit, and collect a bunch of rings. Is it worth clearing all the missions? No, not really. If I want to listen to classic Sonic music, I have YouTube for that. On the plus side, the missions don't have a scoring system. All you need to do is complete them, so that should save you a lot of frustration. Saving you even more hassle is the fact you use your play coins to buy your way to victory. Is it cheap? Yeah, but I'm sure you're a busy person with no time to waste, so go ahead and buy those unlockables. So, how are the bosses? The Big Arm fight is similar to its 16-bit cousin, only that Robotnik has more tricks up his sleeve. Per usual, you can't jump on him as he's sporting spikes at the top, but you can jump into him. His attack patterns are easy to pick up on, even if you never fought him on Genesis. He's not all that hard to beat, and he becomes insultingly easy once you learn the homie attack. The homie attack strips away everything that made him formidable to begin with, which is why they shouldn't have included it. Aside from Robotnik, you'll also get the chance to fight Metal Sonic, only it's taking place in Casino Night Zone for some reason. Were these developers so lazy they couldn't be bothered to create their own version of Stardust Speedway? Historical inaccuracy aside, it's one of the few classic Sonic boss fights. If you were expecting it to be awesome like the HD version, then you're going to be severely disappointed. There's nothing about it that's very challenging or memorable to begin with. Games like Sonic 4 Episode 2 and Sonic Mania had better battles to begin with, so here it feels as though they put in the most minimal effort. It's an uninspired race to the finish line, but unfortunately, it's not the last. The Shadow boss fight takes place in Raccoon Highway, so it at least makes some sense, even if Sonic never fought Shadow there. Maybe Shadow was getting tired of Sonic upstaging him with his revisionist history and decided to put a stop to it.
Not bad for an imposter.
Reasons aside, this fight is exactly like the Metal Sonic boss fight. The only difference is that Mars Sonic can boost. I will give the developers credit for making the battle a little more challenging. Shadow can recover very quickly, and if you're not careful, you're liable to drain your boost. So it's nice that there's some strategy to this race, as disappointing as it is. After that, we get to race Silver, and if you think we're fighting him in Crisis City, then you're wrong. We're in Tropical Resort this time, and it's pretty much the same as the last two fights. The only difference is that Silver can levitate objects to attack you with. It's the most challenging of the three races, but it's still awfully repetitive. You know, in the HD game, all the battles between Metal Sonic, Shadow, and Silver were all unique and required their own strategy. Here, the developers were like, screw that, let's just recycle assets and make them all the same. We get paid either way. As Shadow would say,
How pathetic.
the Bio-Lizard fight handles a little better, even if it is a repeat of the fight from Sonic Adventure 2. You know the drill. Try to avoid his mouth and tail, duck under the energy blast, jump into the red glowing light, bounce on the floating gumballs. What makes it stand out is the fact it's structured on a 2D plane this time, so the developers had to find ways to make it consistent. To their credit, they did, but if they wanted to be clever, they should have given the Bio-Lizard new attacks, creating possibilities for new strategies. Also, it's not Sonic's place to battle the Bio-Lizard. This battle was originally Shadow's. Was there really no other boss battle from the adventure games they could have used? Like, I don't know, the Egg Viper, or Chaos, or even Bigfoot? At least with the Egg Emperor they put some thought into it. It's like the one from Sonic Heroes, only you don't have Knuckles and Tails holding you back. In the original game, it felt pretty chaotic, and you had to depend heavily on level ups to make an impact. Fortunately, the Generations version does away with that nonsense as you can attack him more directly. You're forced to dodge his energy blast by either ducking or jumping, but if you're skilled enough, you can damage him head on. There was a bit of a learning curve to this boss, so I learned the easiest way to damage him is to wait until he gets on the platform with all the cannons. It's at this point he'll come charging at you, leaving himself open. This is your moment when you want to attack. You'll also want to take out the cannons as they'll not only give you boost ability, but they'll fire at Eggman, prompting him to charge at you. What I like about this fight is the fact it's familiar, yet different enough. It's challenging, but not frustrating. It's one of the better bosses of the game, and shows someone on the development team caring enough to make it different. It also goes to show how powerful Sonic has become in later years, so Knuckles' line,
If it wasn't for us, you wouldn't have had a chance.
is a crock of crap. I would talk about the multiplayer aspect of this game, but the problem is that nobody plays it. You could try waiting for an opponent, it might only take you a month or two to find someone to play with, so good luck with that. Instead, I'm going to talk about the time attack. It's fine if you want to test your speed, but the game already judges you based on how fast you go, so this feels redundant. If you like, you can always play it and post your score online. By doing this, you can earn what is called support points. These points will give you new backgrounds for your player ID card. You can customize your card according to what your favorite game in the series is, how long you've been a fan, etc. If you flip it to the back, you can see how long you've played, how many rings you collected, and your overall scores for the levels. As for me, I don't like the game enough to upgrade my rank from amateur. Like the HD game, you need to collect Chaos Emeralds in order to advance. The difference is that you need to play the special stages in order to collect them. I was quite surprised to find they were similar to the ones from Sonic Heroes, but seeing this is an anniversary title, I guess I'll let it slide. I would have preferred if they had thought of something original, but I will admit they're a huge improvement from their predecessor. Mainly because they are nowhere as aggravating, plus there's no point in switching between characters. It's just Sonic and it feels better focused. They're challenging, but not to the point where you want to pull your hair out. It was only the last special stage I had to redo, but as long as you're careful, you shouldn't have too much trouble with it. And finally we get to the Time Eater battle. Graphically speaking, it strongly resembles the one from the HD game, although not as impressive, given the lack of HD. You're still in this warped little vortex with spinning gears that remind me of the adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. Personally, I find them cheesy, but the Time Eater still looks imposing. The good thing is that the battle is nowhere as visually confusing as its HD cousin, as you can see everything clearly. The only time it gets annoying is when Eggman throws those giant clocks at you. Since they're the same color as the Supersonics, this can get messy trying to evade them. As for the music, It's about the same as the HD game, so you can hear my thoughts on that in the HD review. When it comes down to the fight, it's not great by any means, but at least it's a slight improvement from the other game. Here you don't have the option of switching characters, the game will do that for you, and it feels less disjointed as a result. You have to damage the Eggman as both characters, and you can't progress until you've done so. In the classic Sonic section, all you have to do is dodge his lasers and punching attacks. The lasers don't deplete your rings or anything, they just slow you down and waste your time. It would have been more challenging if they did actual damage, but they don't, and it's hardly exciting. The second half of the battle has you controlling Mars Sonic, and it's a bit trickier. You fly around in a 3D space, collecting rings and dodging the missiles Eggman throws at you. He'll also try to fire clocks that repel you back, plus he can get rather handsy, so you'll want to avoid them if you want to attack him. It's a far better fight since there's an element of speed, and both Sonics are vital to the arena. As far as Super Sonic boss battles go, it's hardly the best, but it's an enjoyable enough challenge. And that's Sonic Generations for the 3DS. Control issues aside, it does serve as a nice celebration of Sonic's past. I enjoy collecting the pieces of Sonic art and music, plus it's nice to rotate the character models in sweet stereoscopic 3D. Sadly, the gallery isn't as robust as its HD custom since it gives you the name of the song, but not the game where it came from. This is stupid as they could have easily included in the top screen. See? I did it for you. Just how lazy are you, dimps? In the HD game, they made sure to cite their sources. Why leave me hanging, bro? It would also have been nice if they provided bios for the characters, but I guess a guy can't have everything. Sonic Generations for the 3DS is a decent anniversary title, and it was nice to see classic levels return. However, it suffers from the same problem I have with Dimps games. While other games are serviceable, they never approach the Sonic franchise with much creativity or ambition. Sure, they have the Sonic Advance games with different playable characters, but they never reach the scale of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Then came Sonic Rush with two characters that played so alike that it made you wonder what was the point of including Blaze. Then later we got Sonic 4 Episode 1, a game featuring just Sonic and a handful of rehashed levels. I am just amazed by how Dimps managed to get worse with time. Okay, Sonic Generations is a better game than Sonic 4, and it's not a very meaty experience. There are too few levels, the controls have issues, and although the side missions can be pleasant, they're a mild distraction at best. You don't even collect red rings, even Sonic Colors on the DS let you do that. You know when you're watching TV and instead of getting new episodes, some networks decide to run the best of series, showing clips of your favorite moments of the show? That's this game. Sonic Generations on the 3DS has more of an identity crisis than the HD game because it feels the need to shamelessly copy and paste past levels. It doesn't have much of its own identity, and the fancy 3D visuals aren't fooling anyone. Your enjoyment of the stages will likely hinge on nostalgia, and even then, you won't feel the same rush you did back in the 90s and 2000s when these games came out. It's a game that was clearly made on a tight schedule, so it didn't leave the developers room to come up with enough new content to make it a great experience. I mean, yeah, it's worth playing if you're a huge Sonic fan, but it wasn't worth the $40, which is why I'm glad I got it at a discount. Or better yet, get the HD game instead as they put far more effort into it. If you prefer 2D Sonic, then get Sonic Mania. It has some of the best level design in the 2D games, and the past ones are better handled. Plus, you get more bang for your buck. I wouldn't count this game in the top 10 2D Sonic games, but it's entertaining enough to justify buying it, albeit barely. So thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed my review, and be sure to check back for more awesome content. Peace!
Alright, we're back, Sonic. Now if my calculations are correct, Sega's still the market leader and will never get a bad Sonic game again. Great Scott!
I told you I was the ultimate.